Crash of the crown. The jungle exhaled. Torin Vale felt it before he heard it, the wet, shuddering breath of the alien forest, its massive leaves trembling as if in anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of rotting nectar and charged ozone, a cloying mixture that clung to his skin like a second prison jumpsuit. Above him, the twin suns of Telasia, three blazed through gaps in the emerald and violet canopy, their light fractured by the towering, spiral-trunked trees. Every step sent pain shooting up his bruised ribs, but he didn't dare stop. Not with the distant whine of search vessels slicing through the humid air. Behind him, Princess Novia Telesian lay motionless on the improvised leaf stretcher, her platinum hair fanned out like a shattered crown. The toxin, specifically engineered for her bloodline, had turned her legs into dead weight, but her silver eyes were alert, tracking the shifting shadows of the jungle. "They're sweeping the northern ridge," she murmured, her voice hoarse from thirst. Standard search pattern for downed priority targets. Torin adjusted the vine harness biting into his shoulders. The stretcher, woven from giant waxy leaves and reinforced with salvaged ship wiring, was lighter than the metal one he'd cobbled together after the crash, but after 6 hours of dragging it through razor-edged ferns and over gnarled roots, his muscles screamed for rest. "Priority targets," he repeated, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's you." "What am I?" "Bonus points." Novia's lips thinned. "You're the prisoner who stole an escape pod with the crown princess of the Telasian Dominion." "So yes. Bonus points." A distant explosion rattled the trees. Torin froze, listening as the sound echoed through the valley. "That was the wreckage," he said. "They're erasing evidence." "Of course they are." Novia's fingers twitched against the stretcher, the only part of her lower body she could still move. "My brother doesn't leave loose ends." Flashback, the crash. 3 hours earlier, Torin had been sprawled on the floor of the Alabaster's prisoner bay when the first torpedo hit. The ship, a gleaming dagger of imperial might, had shuddered like a wounded animal, its gravity generators flickering. He'd grabbed the bars of his cell as the deck tilted violently, the energy barrier fizzling out just as the emergency sirens began their shrill death wail. "Ship-wide system failure imminent," the AI had announced, absurdly calm. "Impact with planetary surface in 4 minutes." Torin had run. Not out of bravery, survival was an old habit, carved into him during 3 years in the Vega colony mines before his terrorist arrest. He'd memorized the ship's layout during his transfer, noting the maintenance shafts leading to the escape pods. But when he'd reached the pod bay, the hatches were melted shut, the metal twisted like taffy. That was when he'd heard the voice, weak, but unmistakably royal. "Help. Please." Princess Novia had been pinned under a collapsed beam on the bridge, her ceremonial epaulets torn, her legs limp. The greenish mist still clinging to the air vents told him everything, a neurotoxin attack. Internal sabotage. "Why?" he demanded as he heaved the beam aside. Her silver eyes had locked onto his prisoner tattoo. "Because my brother can't inherit the throne if I'm alive." The present, predator and prey. Now, as Torin hauled the stretcher over a moss-covered log, a new sound cut through the jungle's drone, a rhythmic, metallic clicking, like knives being sharpened. He dropped to a crouch, signaling Novia to stay silent. The creature that emerged from the undergrowth was a nightmare of evolutionary efficiency. 12 feet tall, its segmented carapace shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed erratically, as if reacting to their fear. 6 multi-jointed legs ended in hooked claws, and its elongated head swiveled independently, multiple eyes reflecting Torin's face back at him in grotesque fragments. Novia's breath hitched. "Don't move. It tracks motion." Torin's hand inched toward the jagged piece of whole metal he'd strapped to his belt. The creature's clicking intensified, its body coiling. A search vessel's spotlight speared through the canopy, painting the jungle in stark white. The creature shrieked, its bioluminescence flaring red as it whirled toward the light. Torin didn't wait. He lunged for the stretcher, adrenaline overriding exhaustion as he sprinted toward a fissure in the rock face ahead. The creature gave chase, its claws gouging furrows in the soil. The search vessel's engines roared overhead, drowning Novia's shout as Torin skidded into the crevice just as massive claws scraped the stone behind them. Darkness. Silence. The stench of their sweat. Torin pressed a hand over Novia's mouth as the creature's distorted shadow passed the entrance. After an eternity, the clicking faded. "You're bleeding," Novia whispered. Torin touched his side, his ribs had torn open again. "Worth it." Outside, the search vessel's spotlight swept the trees. Novia's fingers brushed his wrist, her voice barely audible. "They'll keep searching until they find bodies." Torin met her gaze. "Then we give them one. Venom and vines." The crevice was barely wide enough to breathe in. Torin pressed his back against the damp stone, his ribs screaming with every shallow inhale. Next to him, Princess Novia lay motionless on the leaf stretcher, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light filtering through the crack in the rocks. Outside, the bioluminescent predator paced, its hooked claws scraping against the stone as it let out a low, guttural growl. The search vessel's spotlight had long since vanished, but the creature's patience was unwavering. "We can't stay here," Novia whispered. Torin clenched his jaw. "You're paralyzed. That thing out there could slice us in half. And your brother's hunters are turning this jungle upside down to find your corpse. Got any brilliant ideas, Princess?" Novia's gaze flickered to the vines creeping through the crevice's walls. "Actually, yes." She pointed to a cluster of thorn tendrils near the ceiling, their tips glistening with a viscous, amber liquid. "Telasian razor vines. The thorns secrete a neurotoxin, one that counteracts my brother's poison. It's painful, but it'll buy me a few hours of movement." Torin stared at her. "You want to inject yourself with more poison?" "It's not poison to me," she said simply. "My bloodline was engineered centuries ago to resist most biological toxins. That's why Darren needed a custom compound." A shadow crossed her face. He knew. Torin exhaled sharply. "Of course. The perfect assassination, a poison only deadly to the target, leaving no evidence of foul play." He reached for the vines, then hesitated. "How do you know this won't just kill you faster?" Novia's smile was razor-thin. "I don't." The antidote gamble. Torin harvested the thorns carefully, using a shard of metal to scrape the amber venom into a makeshift vial, a hollowed-out seed pod. The air grew thicker with the scent of rotting citrus as the venom pooled, its surface iridescent under the faint light. Novia didn't flinch as Torin pressed the thorn to the blue-tinged skin of her thigh. The effect was immediate. Her back arched off the stretcher, a strangled gasp escaping her lips as the venom surged through her veins. Torin pinned her shoulders down, his own muscles straining. "Breathe through it," he growled. Her fingers dug into his forearm hard enough to draw blood. For 3 agonizing minutes, she convulsed, her pupils dilating until her silver irises were nearly swallowed by black. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the spasms stopped. Novia went limp, sweat glistening on her brow. But when Torin cautiously released her, something miraculous happened, her toes twitched. "It's working," she breathed. Torin didn't celebrate. Not yet. Outside, the predator let out a frustrated screech, its claws gouging deeper grooves into the stone. They were running out of time. The bounty hunter's trail. By the time Novia could wiggle her ankles, the creature had finally retreated, lured away by the distant hum of another search vessel. Torin helped her sit up, his hands lingering a second too long on her waist, partly to steady her, partly to confirm she was real. "You're still weak," he muttered. Novia flexed her fingers, testing her regained mobility. "But I'm not dead. That's enough for now." They emerged from the crevice into a jungle transformed. The twin suns had dipped below the canopy, painting the world in bruised purples and deep greens. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed along the tree trunks, casting eerie shadows. Torin kept one hand on his makeshift weapon, the hull shard, now honed into a crude blade, as they picked their way through the undergrowth. Then he saw it. A footprint. Not from the creature. Not from any native fauna. The imprint of a boot, its tread stamped with the imperial insignia. Fresh. Novia went rigid beside him. Bounty hunters. Torin's grip tightened on the blade. How many? She crouched, tracing the edge of the print. 1. Maybe 2. They're tracking us. A snap of branches. Torin spun, shoving Novia behind him as a figure materialized from the shadows. Kale Vex. Darren's personal hunter. The man was a legend, a ghost who'd brought back heads from rebellions without a single shot fired. His armor was matte black, absorbing the jungle's light rather than reflecting it. The only color came from the twin plasma pistols holstered at his hips, their grips worn from use. "Princess," Kale said, his voice like gravel. "You look alive." Novia lifted her chin. Disappointed? Kale's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just surprised. You were supposed to be an easy job. His gaze slid to Torin. And you? Prisoner 37,529. The terrorist who just became a treasonous fugitive. Torin bared his teeth. Call me Torin. Kale drew a pistol. I'll call you dead. The trap. Torin didn't think. He lunged, tackling Novia to the ground as plasma fire seared the air where her head had been. The shot ignited the razor vines behind them, sending a cascade of embers raining down. Run! Torin hauled Novia up, half dragging her as Kale advanced, his shots methodical. Novia stumbled, her legs still unsteady. We can't outrun him. Torin's eyes locked onto a cluster of boulders ahead, and the ancient-looking stone arch behind them. We don't have to. He yanked her toward the arch just as Kale fired again. The shot ricocheted off the stone, but Torin didn't stop. With a final burst of strength, he shoved Novia through the arch. And the ground vanished beneath them. They fell into darkness. Temple of the Forgotten. The air inside the temple tasted like rust and age. Torin ran his fingers along the etched symbols on the massive doors, their grooves worn smooth by centuries of neglect. The metal was cold under his touch, humming faintly with some long-dormant energy. Beside him, Novia traced the insignia on her torn uniform, an identical match to the markings before them. This shouldn't be here, she murmured. Torin shot her a sideways glance. You recognize it? It's a royal seal. But this temple predates the current dynasty by at least 1,000 years. She pressed her palm against the center glyph. Which means someone in my bloodline has been lying about our history. A grinding shudder shook the doors as they slowly parted, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. The walls were lined with towering statues of armored figures, their faces eroded into anonymity. At the room's center stood a dais supporting a single, pod-like structure, its surface frosted over, glowing with a pale blue light. Novia limped forward, her legs still unsteady from the toxin. That's a Telasian healing pod. Ancient design, but the tech is still used in royal infirmaries. Torin didn't like the way her eyes lit up. You're not seriously thinking. She was already climbing onto the dais. It could purge the rest of the toxin from my system. Before Torin could stop her, Novia placed her hand on the pod's control panel. The frost instantly melted away, revealing a translucent lid that slid open with a hiss of escaping gas. The interior was lined with neural filaments that pulsed like living veins. Novia hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The pod sealed shut behind her. Awakening the Guardian. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the temple screamed. The statues along the walls shuddered, their stone shells cracking away to reveal sleek robotic constructs beneath. Their eyes blazed to life, scanning the room with lethal precision before locking onto Torin. "Unauthorized presence detected," boomed a mechanized voice from the ceiling. "Defense protocols engaged." Torin barely dodged the first energy blast. It seared past his shoulder, leaving the air smelling of ozone. He dove behind a crumbling pillar as another shot shattered the stone where his head had been. "Novia." He slammed his fist against the pod's exterior. "Whatever you're doing, hurry it up." Inside, Novia's body floated in a viscous fluid, her face contorted in silent agony as the filaments attached themselves to her spine. The pod's display flickered with Telasian script, too fast for Torin to read, but the gist was clear: the machine was repairing her, but at a cost. The Guardian constructs advanced, their movements synchronized. Torin gripped his makeshift blade, knowing it was useless against their armor. Then his eyes caught on the temple's control panel, still active from Novia's touch. If he could just reach it. A blast grazed his thigh, sending him sprawling. Pain radiated up his leg as he crawled toward the dais, the constructs closing in. His fingers brushed the panel's edge. And the world exploded in light. The AI's revelation. When Torin's vision cleared, the Guardians were frozen mid-motion. The temple's central hologram flickered to life, projecting the image of a robed figure with Novia's silver eyes. "Genetic signature confirmed," the AI intoned. "Welcome, daughter of the First Dynasty." Novia gasped as the pod's lid slid open, the filaments retracting. She stumbled out, but her legs no longer shook. The bluish tinge to her skin was gone. Torin grabbed her arm. What the hell was that? She stared at the hologram. A failsafe. This temple was built to preserve the truth. The AI's gaze shifted between them. The crown's fire burns brightest in shadows. You have been chosen to carry its light. A hidden compartment in the dais slid open, revealing a small data crystal. Novia snatched it up, her hands trembling. This is a map. To something called the Ashen Nexus. Torin's blood ran cold. The Ashen Nexus was a rebel myth, a hidden stronghold where the first uprising against the Telasian Empire had been planned. That's impossible. The Nexus was destroyed centuries ago. The hologram flickered. The fire cannot be extinguished. Then the temple shook. Not from the AI, but from something outside. Kale's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by external speakers. "I do love a good reunion. Come out, or I start carving through the walls." Novia's grip on the crystal tightened. "We need to go. Now." The AI's final words followed them as they fled through a rear passage. "Beware the prince who wears a dead man's face." The bounty hunter's gambit. The fall lasted seconds but stretched into eternity. Torin's stomach lurched as he and Novia plunged into the abyss, the jungle's humid air whipping past them. He barely had time to twist his body, wrapping his arms around the princess as they crashed through a canopy of thick, rubbery leaves that slowed their descent. They landed hard in a shallow pool of stagnant water, the impact driving the breath from Torin's lungs. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of their ragged breathing. Novia groaned, pushing herself onto her elbows. "You could have warned me about the drop." Torin spat out a mouthful of brackish water. "Didn't exactly have time for a safety briefing." Above them, Kale's silhouette appeared at the mouth of the tunnel they'd fallen through, backlit by the jungle's eerie glow. His voice echoed down, cold and amused. "Clever. But you're only delaying the inevitable." A plasma bolt sizzled into the water beside them. Torin grabbed Novia's wrist and yanked her into the cover of towering, mushroom-like growths that lined the cavern walls. The space was vast, some kind of underground river system, its walls slick with bioluminescent algae that cast everything in a ghostly blue light. Novia's eyes darted across the terrain. "We need to move. He'll find a way down." Torin nodded, wincing as pain flared in his ribs. "Any idea where down leads?" She pointed to a narrow passage half submerged in water. If this connects to the main river, we can lose him in the current. The chase. They waded through the waist-deep water, the algae's glow revealing jagged rock formations and strange, translucent fish that darted away from their movements. Behind them, the distant splash of boots hitting water confirmed Kale had taken the bait. Novia's regained mobility was shaky but functional. She moved with the precision of someone trained in survival, her breaths measured despite the adrenaline. Torin, on the other hand, was running on fumes. His ribs ached, his shoulder throbbed where the harness had rubbed it raw, and every step sent fresh pain shooting up his legs. Ahead, the passage forked. Left, Novia whispered. The current's stronger there. Torin didn't argue. They pushed forward, the water growing colder as the tunnel narrowed. Then, without warning, the ground vanished beneath them. The current seized them like a living thing, dragging them into a churning underground rapid. Torin's world became a blur of dark water and blue light, his body battered against rocks as he fought to keep his head above the surface. He caught glimpses of Novia, a flash of platinum hair, a pale hand grasping at the air, before the river spat them out into a wider chamber. They washed up on a rocky shore, gasping. Novia coughed, rolling onto her back. Remind me, to thank you, for this wonderful excursion. Torin groaned, spitting out water. Next time, we'll take a luxury cruiser. A low chuckle cut through the chamber's echoes. Kale stood at the water's edge, his armor dripping but his pistols dry. Touching. Really? Torin scrambled to his feet, putting himself between Novia and the hunter. Kale tilted his head. You know, I was paid to bring back her head. But you? You're just a bonus. He raised a pistol. Any last words, terrorist? Novia's hand closed around Torin's wrist. Now, she hissed. Torin didn't hesitate. He yanked her sideways as the cavern's ceiling, weakened by erosion and their violent entrance, collapsed in a roar of stone and water. The reckoning. When the dust settled, Kale was gone, buried under tons of rock. Torin and Novia crouched in the rubble, their ears ringing. The chamber was now sealed, the only exit blocked. But the river had carved another path, a smaller tunnel leading deeper into the earth. Novia exhaled sharply. That won't hold him forever. Torin wiped blood from his lip. Then we keep moving. As they ventured into the tunnel, the algae's glow intensified, revealing something that made them both freeze. A structure. Ancient, metallic, and unmistakably not natural. The temple's entrance loomed ahead, its doors etched with symbols that matched the ones on Novia's royal insignia. Torin frowned. You know what this is? Novia's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. And if we're lucky, it's our way out.